Hello, and welcome to HGO Digital. I'm Patrick Summers, Houston Grand Opera's Artistic and Music Director. We hope you've been enjoying our digital offerings this season and that you and yours are all staying safe and finding ways to stay connected during these challenging times. As 2020 began, HGO was excited to bring a new world premiere opera to our stage this season, The Snowy Day, based on the beloved children's book by Ezra Keats. And as this year progressed and theaters around the world have had to postpone their seasons, the team behind this new opera has learned how to create together while remaining apart. So, rather than gathering in the theater to watch this magical opera premiere on our stage, we're inviting you to join us here on video calls and in the socially distanced rehearsal room as we share a behind-the-scenes look at the creation of The Snowy Day. Opera is an international art form, but it's also a local one. The Snowy Day is a story told through music that is deeply rooted in our communities, with the power to show us ourselves and connect us to others. We believe these kinds of new works, brought to us by new voices like the amazing talent of Joel Thompson, are the beating heart of our art form, and they're needed now, today, more than ever. HGO Digital is part of the Sarah and Ernest Butler Performance Series and made possible by the support of all of the HGO patrons and donors. We would also like to thank the Ezra Keats Foundation for allowing us to adapt this wonderful book. If you would like more information on how to support our work at HGO, the work of the Keats Foundation, or program information, please visit hgo.org/digital. We look forward to the day we can all be together again in the theater. Until then, the creative team behind The Snowy Day would like to invite you into our homes and offices and hearts to hear more about the making of this beautiful new work. Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Way behind your screens, can you hear me? Can you hear me? So happy to see you all. And, you know, starting any new opera is like the greatest day in opera. This one is so special because I met Joel quite by accident. I was teaching conducting students in Aspen, and they were doing readings of new works. So I wasn't there to evaluate the new works or even really to hear them. I was there to help the conductors learn how to rehearse new operas. And I heard about 25 or 30 seconds of a piece, and I thought to myself, I wrote down in my notes, my God, this is such an extraordinary composer. And then I met him, and we sat down under an aspen tree. It sounds like a fable. You know, we sat down under an aspen tree in Aspen and first talked about the work that has ended up being The Snowy Day and the work that we're starting today. So I could not be more thrilled that all of you are involved in it. And I am especially moved, having been involved in so many new operas in my career, that this new, young, great compositional voice is writing his first opera for us, and that we're all involved in it. So thank you, Joel.
We were devastated when we had to cancel the performances of Snowy Day that we had planned. This is a world premiere. You don't cancel world premieres in any way lightly, especially of very significant and important pieces like the Snowy Day. And we started to look at how we could tell the story, how we could continue to grow the piece, evolve the piece. So the idea of doing a workshop that really allows you to unpack and find out what works, what doesn't work, is a sort of, in some ways, a luxury that we don't often get to do. We have an amazing resource to us in Houston Methodist. They said, look, we're going to need help on this. Singers are already being called super spreaders. What does that really mean? And they, as partners to us, have thrown literally all of their resources that they possibly could. So as we started to talk about protocols about how we could get people back to work, we wrote protocols, we checked them with Houston Methodist, we listened to them. They're constantly refining and helping us refine those. But our primary purpose is to make sure that we could get back to doing some work in a safe environment. It goes so much further than obviously just the normal safety procedures and protocols you take, because singing is something that does project things into the air. So I'm just enormously proud of our company, but also of that relationship with Houston Methodist, because they've done literally everything they can to help keep us safe and get us back to work at a time when they are under enormous stress.
We'll make our way through, and Joel and I will work on things. This is a chance for him to hear his music, really for the first time outside of his own imagination. So with the screens and the distance, faster tempos are hard, things like that. We will stop and start and repeat a lot of things today, so take it easy on your voice today and in the morning too. Okay, let's go from Kevin somewhere around 35 perhaps, something like that. Go ahead.
You know, the company itself was undergoing a tough time with furloughs and trying to balance budgets in a time when no artistic work can be happening. And so art had to continue, art had to persevere. And it's our connection, our sense of duty to bringing this little ball of light to fruition that kept us going. It became a sort of lifeline. It makes you realize how important art is. To reinvigorate, to provide a sense of hope, to refocus on our common humanity at a time when there's so much discord and disconnection.
You know, one of the qualities of The Snowy Day as an opera is that it is full of awe and wonder and hope and gratitude. And I think that will be what people will take from The Snowy Day when we can be back to a live performance and you're in the same room as a great voice and an orchestra.
3 sidewalks.
It was very important to us that this be an opportunity to really open the doors to the Opera House and invite in audiences that perhaps may not come to the opera, that may not think of coming to the opera. And so The Snowy Day opens that door in the way that Ezra Jack Keats did. He invited in all kinds of people, and that's what the opera will do. I'm a children's book author and editor and publisher. So much to my delight, when the invitation came to write the libretto for the Snowy Day opera, it seemed like a very natural progression as someone who's written for young people and who is a big fan of Ezra Jack Keats and his work. And I love that question. What is the Snowy Day about? It's about many things. I will tell you what the plot is for anybody who's not familiar with the Snowy Day. Many of us, like me, grew up on the book. And then I'll tell you what I think it's about. The plot of the Snowy Day is that a young boy, Peter, wakes up, looks out his window, and there snow has fallen during the night. He's enchanted. He rushes out in his red snowsuit to have a Snowy Day adventure on his own. He encounters some big boys. A snowball fight ensues. He has a moment of solitude where he is walking, toes pointing in, toes pointing out. Then he creates a snowball, puts the snowball in his pocket, thinking that it will be there the next morning when he wakes up. And we all know that a snowball will not last if you put it in your pocket. Peter learns that despite impermanence, there is renewal, there's a new day. He looks out the window the next morning and more snow has fallen. I believe personally that the book is about the power of hope, resilience, a new day, faith. You know, there's many kind of spiritual implications to the work.
Ezra's books are timeless. The Snowy Day is the New York Public Library's most checked out book in its entire 125-year history. It's very important when talking about the Snowy Day to remember that this book was part of a very long-lived movement to bring diversity into children's literature. The Snowy Day, which was published in 1962, was not the first book to feature an African-American child as a protagonist. It was, however, the first book to break through the color barrier, in essence, and be embraced across cultural, ethnic, and social lines. It was embraced by the entire community. The Ezra Jack Keats Foundation was founded originally by Ezra in 1963, just after the Snowy Day actually was published and just after he won the Caldecott. And it was begun in partnership with his best friend, Martin Pope. And during his lifetime, he used it to support causes that he believed in strongly. And in his will, he left the royalties from his books to the foundation, and his instructions to the trustees were to do good.
Well, of course, the foundation's role is to keep the works of Ezra Jack Keats in front of the public, and what an important writer in children's literature, in the world of BIPOC literature, in the world of Jewish literature. He was such a polymath and such an important American voice. So the dealings with the Ezra Jack Keats Foundation have been very inspiring and really, really important to this process.
The programs of the foundation were designed to, in some way, reflect the events and the help that Ezra got in his life to realize his own goals. And so we have three major programs. One is the Bookmaking Program, and that is in public schools here in New York City. Students in grades 3 through 12 write and illustrate their own books, and this really empowers the kids, and it also creates a tremendously strong relationship between kids and students and reading. Our second major program is the Mini Grant Program. This is a national program, also focusing on public education. And this allows us to give small grants to teachers and librarians who dream up some wonderful, wonderful program that they can't otherwise do. There isn't a budget to do it. And then the last program is our Ezra Jack Keats Award. And this award was created to give encouragement to early career authors and illustrators. It's very significant, the 35th anniversary of the EJK Award. When we began 35 years ago, we had no idea if it would take hold and what the effect of the award would have on people's careers. And it's a tremendous honor to be able to look back now, after 35 years, to see that we have launched the careers of some of the big stars working in children's lit today. And having this coincide with the HGO adaptation of The Snowy Day is wonderful because it brings the past together with the present and the future. We need to build the audiences of the future. The only way to do that is to reach into the worlds that these children inhabit and to bring them in. That's what we do at the foundation, and that is also how we partner with other art forms. When we got the invitation from the Houston Grand Opera to adapt The Snowy Day into an opera, it seemed like such a natural combination because, of course, people talk about opera all the time as if it's from outer space. Of course it isn't. In order to understand that it isn't, you have to be invited in. And you have to be invited in by something that's familiar to you. And so the choice of The Snowy Day, which is a childhood memory, it's a familiar, warm memory for the adults, and for the children, it's a live and present memory. So what better way to invite people into an art form that they might not otherwise think of as theirs than by saying, no, here, look, it is yours. You've read this book. You know this story. Come see it again. And so The partnership was perfect because our goals are the same. The goal of the foundation and the goal of HGO, to expand the footprint of our art form.
The idea to adapt The Snowy Day came from a collaboration with American soprano Julia Bullock, who was originally going to play Peter until COVID prevented her from joining us for rehearsals. And we were very excited to welcome Raven McMillan to the cast as Peter. The Snowy Day book was a big part of my own childhood. It was published the year I was born. So even when Julia mentioned it, I filed it away immediately thinking, wow, that's a really great idea, because the book is very sparse. It's a work of very gentle philosophy. It's not a work of a lot of action, but it does, Peter's inner world, which is what the book is about, is what music can do. Music is an evocation of our inner world. Because music is the engine of opera, that creates an enormous opportunity for a composer.
Music has always been a part of the fabric of my life. Both of my parents met as amateur musicians, and we sang songs and prayed before going to bed every night. So music was always a part of my life, and lots of different types of music as well. But classical music sort of embedded itself into my heart when I was about 7, when I got my first piano lessons for my birthday. I didn't start really writing music until about high school. My career didn't really kick off until about 5 years ago. I was born in the Bahamas to Jamaican parents, and I came to the US when I was 10 and lived in Houston for 3 years. Did middle school there, and then Atlanta for high school onward. And so, as you can see, being in the southern climes, I was not used to snow at all as a child. But I did read The Snowy Day as a kid growing up in the Bahamas. That sense of wonder that Peter has as a kid in that book, I definitely felt, especially since I've never seen snow in real life before when I'm reading it. I don't actually have the music fully formed in my head. I will have an idea, a kernel that I will want to play with. And I think it's the nature of my music making, probably in the Black church tradition as well, is that things are never really the same. You can sort of play it on the piano one day for one service and the same hymn, and then the next service you're going to play it a different way because you're feeling something else. It's very important for me to get the words in my body, in my mouth. There's a lot of me walking around like a madman saying words over and over again to see how they feel, where they should be in the tessitura and all of that. Just the physicality of diction and how that makes a music on its own, and how I will then make music to interact with that is a part of the process. We went through the process of trying to find a librettist, and I told them I wanted to work with a woman, just for gender parity on the creative team in some regard, librettist and composer.
Finding a librettist for this opera was very challenging because the work is challenging for a librettist, because in Ezra Jack Keats' book, Peter never says anything. He has no vocabulary at all. He's talked about, and we experience his inner experience, but not his lexicon. So the Ezra Jack Keats Foundation recommended Andrea Davis Pinkney to us. And I called her out of the blue. I said, how do you feel about writing a libretto on The Snowy Day? And I put her and Joel together to see if there was any kind of synergy there. And there was an extraordinary creative fire between them.
When the call came to create the libretto for the Snowy Day opera, I had two emotions at the same time. Oh goody, oh dang. Oh goody, of course, because who would not want to write an opera based on the Ezra Jack Keats classic? At the same time, as a fan of that book, I knew immediately that Peter, the protagonist, does not say anything. Young Peter doesn't talk. No one in his world says a word. So there came my great opportunity and a challenge. How do you tell a story in which the characters don't talk? So what I've decided to do with the libretto is expand the canvas on Peter's world. So the poetry of the libretto seeks to render the language of Peter's inner world and the people in that world so that we do know what is going on with Peter from the inside out. For me, one of the most surprising aspects of working on this opera is this. As a children's book author, a lot of folks don't know this, authors and illustrators who are not the same person do not meet each other. It is the job of the person in the publishing company to keep those individuals separate. So the author never speaks to the artist. So coming to an opera that is wholly collaborative was a very different experience and a wonderful surprise.
Working with Andrea has been a joy. She just infuses words with this pop and zizzle and zing. It's our first opera, both of us, as librettist, as composer. We were unsure of how the process would actually work. My first reaction when seeing her libretto was like, wow, that's a lot. She wrote so many words. But I came to realize that that was an act of trust on her part, and that really moved me because she described it as a salad bar approach. She said, I want you to choose what you think will make this whole thing work. She says she's not prose proud. She's such a poet, she is. She's not prose proud. She said, as long as, there are certain things that she's like, this is what I want to keep here. And I'm like, yep, got you. But other things, she was just like, I just wanted to let you choose what you needed to bring this music to life. And so I really appreciate the trust that she put in me as a collaborator in this process. Before I even got the libretto, I came up with a kernel of an idea, a musical idea that became the underlying motif for the entire opera. It's the Snowy Day theme. It's a simple, I can play it on the piano if you want. So it just goes, just 4 notes. And I just wanted it to be really simple and childlike in a way that captures a little bit of the wonder and simple childlikeness of of the book. But then there's ways to reharmonize it to sort of capture the introspective nature of Peter and the sort of sense of wonder he experiences when he's walking out into the world. And so this little simple piano, that simple idea then turned into something like this. So it has this sort of, thing about it. And so that idea was what became the motif that saturates the entire opera. But then when I got Andrea's words, it made characters. Whereas before I was making music that was about feelings and snow, it was only until I got her words that I got to see people.
When I embarked on the writing of the libretto for The Snowy Day, I embarked on it through the lens of my little girl. I was the child of Black parents who were very active in the civil rights movement. They had very limited means. I was born in the inner city. They pooled their pennies in a jelly jar to save their money to buy their newborn daughter a copy of The Snowy Day because it featured a child that looked like their child. And it featured a loving relationship with a mother, with an African-American mother and her son. And that's what they had, a loving relationship with African-American parents and their child. And that is the universal nature of The Snowy Day. It's about a loving family who happens to be a family of color. It's about a boy who goes out on a wonderful adventure and discovers new things and discovers his own agency and goes through a few hard times when these snowballs are pelted at him. and discovers that there's a new day tomorrow. And those are the universal themes that aren't about Black trauma. It's a beautiful story of wonder and enchantment. And when I read that as a child, I saw myself. I saw my mama. I saw my daddy. I saw my friends. I saw my street. I saw my neighborhood. I saw the experience that I had as expressed through Peter's enchantment.
It's one of the first things we talked about when we sat down in a coffee shop somewhere in Manhattan and we first met each other. I wanted to make sure that our representation of Peter didn't fall into many of the stereotypes that can sometimes happen when representing a Black family. And since this is going to be, one of the few Black families represented on the opera stage, in the book, the dad is not present in The Snowy Day. And he is present in future books in the canon by Ezra Keats. We agreed that it was important. We had discussions about maybe we should bring the dad there so we don't imply that this is a single parent household, which is a common trope when representing Black families.
It was a matter of growing the story to bring it all around in ways that really bring it theatrically alive.
We decided on including an aria that would allow for more suspension of disbelief on the part of, especially Black audience members, in that you're letting your kid out into the snow by themselves to play in a red hoodie. That's scary nowadays. Tamir Rice is an example of what can happen when that goes wrong. And so we decided, it's not in the book, but we decided to include an aria that would highlight those anxieties inherent in that decision. And so Mama's Misgivings, the third number in the opera, was included there. And Andrea's words for that are so gorgeous. My beautiful boy in a blanket of white, bright as the day you came into our lives. It used to be my brown sugar boy in a blanket of white. But eventually our conversation about describing that contrast in the color of his skin and the color of the snow, we thought that maybe it might be better with the spirit of the book in that Peter's skin color is never mentioned. He's just a boy. That maybe it'd be better with beautiful. And my brown sugar boy has a different rhythm than my beautiful boy. And so that changed the entire aria, that one word shift. And so that's sort of the play back and forth that Andrea and I had, where a word would change and the aria would completely change.
I know for me, whenever I hear Mama's Misgivings, when I just hear the piano music, when I hear it sung, I am a puddle. I am a puddle. And to see what music can bring to words, what Joel has done with Mama's Misgivings, he brings such emotion to the sentiment that I am seeking to convey with the words. And it's just a keen reminder that when you bring words together with music, something pretty incredible happens. I knew of Joel before I actually met him. I knew of his work on 7 Last Words of the Unarmed, a groundbreaking composition that really looks at the tragedy of African-American men, the deaths that have happened at the hands of authority figures. And when I heard that music, and then I learned that Joel would be the composer for the Snowy Day opera, I thought he's perfect. They're very different, of course. What Joel does with that composition, and also with the Snowy Day, is he invites me, he invites us to our catharsis.
You know, 7 Last Words, it's almost unbearably beautiful. It's a work of resistance, and it's an elegy. It's a requiem.
Officers, why do you have your guns
many things at once, it absolutely stuns an audience. You know, they're not expecting the spiritual and emotional power of that work.
Working on Snowy Day was the complete opposite of working on the Seven Last Words of the Unarmed. I've described it as healing in the past, the working on it, and that is true. But I think a more specific way of describing the process is that it allowed me to reconnect with my inner child. That has been wonderful, not looking at the world through fear, but through wonder.
Joel is Peter. He brings the heart of the show together.
No.
I think the big advantage of new opera is that it opens up the stories that we're telling, who is telling these stories, and what these stories are about. Representation makes opera better. What we're striving to do these days with new work is to open up the perspective of who is telling the operatic repertoire and what the operatic repertoire is about, so that when we come to the opera, we see ourselves represented. So when we come to the rehearsal room, we see ourselves amplified. This
Last frontier is, creating these stories. What stories get to be told on these stages? It's been quite dismal, I mean, the Metropolitan Opera, the largest opera company in the country, is going to present its first opera by a Black composer for the first time next season, and that's crazy, especially in America, in which Black culture has and Black music has shaped a lot of our culture as a whole, as a country. And there's something about working in this genre, telling it with this aesthetic, in this idiom, that seems revolutionary and subversive, and I like that energy. I like being a part of that. I'm in dialogue with a legacy of opera composition, but also bringing my unique perspective as a Black person in this country to this art form. And I think there's a dialogue and a friction that I think yields an energy that I love, that I thrive on. That's sort of in all of my work, that I'm referencing Bach and Mozart, but it's also very, very Black,
We've always believed that we invite everybody to the opera, but in real terms, that has tended to be a smaller group of people. An opera company needs to reflect the entire city that it serves. And Houston is a very, very diverse population, and we have an art form that we believe in terms of its beauty and its majesty, its ability to impact, but it right now is aimed at a very small group of people.
The grandeur of our city is its people and the diversity of its people. And our works and the people represented on stage and in the production teams and the composers and in our orchestra and in our audience, the representation has to look like our city if we're going to be really vibrant and really be Houston's opera company.
I am Kiana Caleb, an HGO supporter and one of the underwriters for The Snowy Day. As the operas are being planned for HGO, as a patron and someone who's just involved and looking forward to hearing things, you always get a little bit of a preview of what's to come. Sometimes when it's the new works, you can actually start to hear and be involved with things very early on in the creative process. And that's what happened with me for The Snowy Day. So it was 2 years ago that I had the opportunity to hear Andrea speak at a luncheon where I thought I was just going to be hearing about this is how we start off when you're a librettist and you're writing for a new opera. And it was very interesting just from that perspective. But it also just made me really happy. I remember coming home and telling my mother, like, you're not going to believe what they're doing an opera on. And when I told her The Snowy Day, she had the same reaction as I did. And it was, how? Like, there are no words there. Like, what, like, how is this going to look? And I was like, I don't know, but I met the person who's actually like writing the words there. And it was such a new level of excitement to see something be created. And I think the other piece that made it so important or that stood out for me was something that was being created from something that I was already familiar with. And, you don't usually think of the everyday, a children's story, a book that you're familiar with becoming an opera. And so my interest was piqued from then.
So part of my job is just the history of opera. And so I'm talking about every work we do on the opera stage. I'm telling our audiences about the music and the libretto of Mozart and Da Ponte and The Marriage of Figaro. If you look back at 1786, when The Marriage of Figaro premiered in Vienna, the vast majority of the operas that year in Vienna, in Prague, in Paris, in every single opera house were new works. And now we've somehow gotten to the point where the vast majority of the works we do are not new works. And that's something I would love to see change. When audiences get nervous about world premieres, I love to remind them that every single opera they love was at one point a world premiere. Tosca was a world premiere, La Bohème was a world premiere, Carmen was a world premiere, Aida was a world premiere. Every single opera was a world premiere at some point. So if you want to find more operas, and you want to just love the music that's telling a story that you want to experience, world premieres are what's important.
There's a wonder that happens at the opera where you hear a story, but seeing how it's actually done, how is it interpreted on the stage, it's always just a wondrous thing. And so when I'm thinking about The Snowy Day, I'm thinking about the excitement of colors and lighting, and I'm thinking about the snow. I'm excited to see what the creative team has put together.
When I saw the set design and the costume sketches for the first time, I had the immediate feeling that I had as a child when I read The Snowy Day for the first time, which is wanting to peel open the pages of that book and wishing as a child that I could step on to Peter Street.
Our costumes are designed by Jessica John. Our set was created and designed by Amy Rubin. Ezra Jack Keats was such an incredible visual artist as well as an author. His aesthetic is so particular in his use of found objects, in his collage work. The design team and I had to sort of figure out a way to not only bring in the world of The Snowy Day, but the entire Ezra Jack Keats canon. So what Amy Rubin has done is create this massive playground on stage. And Amy has this extraordinary imagination to create a world that looks like it's the world of a child looking outside. So sort of in the way that we all as kids created massive pillow forts and blankets and playgrounds, Amy's created this giant playground for us to play with on stage. Jessica has been so great about taking the iconic images in the books and giving it life on stage that feels lived in, but also represents a little bit of the book aspect on stage, the two-dimensionality that we sort of grew up associating with the book, so that the characters feel both lived in and familiar at the same time.
I had my own sense of wonder and like mind-blown experience when I got to see the set models that Amy had put together. I mean, Omer talks about it all the time. My mouth was on the floor. I literally looked like a child again, and I was in front of, fancy people, and I had to keep it together. But yeah, it's what makes the opera opera. It brings it to life. We're getting together to essentially workshop the work, just to get a feel for the piece. The piece is right now on paper, and it's not really a piece until we hear it in the air.
In every creation of a new premiere, there's always this stress of time. So with the premiere being postponed, we were kind of given the gift of time with this workshop. Because we've all been creating separately, we've all been working on this separately, and instead of having to hurry everything up, we have the time to spend in a room together, even with social distance. Being in the same room together is a whole other energy, and that's going to be what this next couple weeks are going to be about.
And so, yeah, Zoom has sort of been the medium of our connection in the last 7 months.
I wake up many mornings to Zoom or not to Zoom. That is the question. And it's been a little bit weird. These are people who I have really come to love and enjoy spending time with, and seeing them on a screen. We're doing a lot of virtual hugs during the rehearsal process. Many of them will be in Houston. I will be in New York on Zoom. It is going to be a new adventure.
Yeah, it would have been a very different world if it weren't for the pandemic. But I'm excited for this process. We get some time to live with the piece, and that makes the final product that much better, I think. So I'm grateful for that one silver lining. COVID definitely derailed things. It was so hard to focus. The majority of the orchestration of the work was done in the last 7 months. And it's been hard. I feel like if there weren't a pandemic or, a racial reckoning happening in this country, I could have done it in a lot quicker time. It just seemed like one thing after the next. It was hard to be, bawling your eyes out mourning Ahmaud Arbery, which that was the one that got me. It's hard to do that and then go back to this music and try and get in touch with your inner child again when your inner child is just like in a corner crying as well,
There was a way of thinking of art as an abstract concept that lives in the stratosphere. But what we've all learned during COVID is that when we are isolated, when we are scared, when we are fearful for ourselves and our community, what we reach for is art in its many different forms. We use it to communicate with each other. We use it to find ourselves in it. We use it to find entertainment and provocation. That's the thing that we've reached to so that we don't feel so alone in a time like this.
The need for art doesn't change just because the world changes. We need it even more now. People are so hungry and thirsty for engagement, and engagement invariably comes from art.
I think often about the books that I grew up with that I loved as a child, and I know for me now, as a grown-up, sharing books with children, you know, when a child says, "Tell me a story," what they're really saying is, "Tell me how to wonder. Tell me what's possible. Tell me how to dream. Tell me how to think about the world." And that is an ageless invitation.
Trying to look at the world through Peter's eyes reminded me of the choice that we have as adults to either look at the world with fear and then to look at the world through eyes of wonder. I think that the choice of fear and wonder can be the difference between life and death. Not to be super dramatic, but you know, if an officer looked at Tamir Rice with wonder instead of fear, he would be alive. If people choose to look at me with wonder instead of fear, that's great for me too. I'm hoping that when this does come to stage, that the music itself will be a sort of hymn to connection. That's what the opera is about. The last picture in the book is Peter holding hands with his friend, walking between these giant snowbanks. After all of this journey of introspection in the snow by himself, he comes to realize that snow can melt someday, so I might as well share this with someone else. The last moment of the opera is him throwing that snowball to Amy, saying, "Catch," you know, like he's giving away this precious experience that he wanted to hold on to all for himself to someone else. And I think that's what the opera is about, connection. Yeah, so that has particular resonance nowadays, for sure.
I see the red square, so that means
It's recording. Okay, yeah. Okay.
Do you want to just take a look at it? You want to just like...
Yeah, it's recording.
Okay, good. Okay, I'm muting myself now.